Hello, everybody. My name is Thomas James Thomas. I am a professional sign language interpreter. I work mainly with deaf children from kindergarten up to 12th grade, and here I have a hard of hearing teacher named Brittany Loosli, excuse me, and welcome to our podcast, Into Deaf Life. This is our premiere episode. Uh, Brittany, do you want to introduce more about yourself?
Sure. My name is Brittany Loosli. I am hard of hearing. I was born hard of hearing, but grew up orally. I found ASL when I was in college, and that was the most incredible thing that had ever happened to me. Fell in love with it, took off from there. I now teach ASL in public high schools. I teach 9th through 12th graders, levels 1 through 3.
Awesome. Awesome. So about me and my past, I didn't really learn any sign language or anything until I started to serve as a missionary for my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Uh, Grew to love the culture and everyone in it. And after my 2 years as a missionary, I decided to go to college and get my bachelor's degree. Uh, and I got my signing skills up or I can be a sign language interpreter. Uh, right now, primarily, I work in schools, but I am working to be able to interpret in freelance situations, which is anywhere. Uh, Now, Brittany, you said that when you found sign language, it was rather freeing. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so growing up, I grew up orally, meaning that my parents wanted me to learn to speak. So, most, if not all, of elementary school up until about roughly seventh, eighth grade, I was in speech therapy learning how to quote unquote listen and how to speak. And it was exhausting, it was draining. My grades actually kind of suffered because by the time I was done with speech therapy and went back to class, my I was so brain dead I didn't want to do anything else. When I found ASL, it was so liberating to me to be able to communicate with people in a way that wasn't exhausting, but I was still understood and able to get my message across, and no one had to second guess what I was saying. I didn't have to take the time to lip read. Um, it was just much more free.
Yeah. When I was first really introduced to the deaf culture and sign, I'm gonna admit I was, in many people's perspective, an idiot. I wanted to go the route that was easiest for me, not really understanding what it's like for another person with hearing loss, be they deaf, hard of hearing, whatever, and understand that I had to change myself so everyone can better understand. Um, I'm embarrassed to say that for a while I was an advocate of oralism. This is for those of you who don't understand this. Oralism is a method that Brittany was grew up with, forcing more for lip reading and try to understand them and try to speak it themselves. Try to verbally speaking and do that. Well, as this podcast it will even show right now, this is just an audio podcast, and so even this is not accessible to people that are hard of hearing and deaf. So,
No, and that's why we've decided that we're going to do two different types. The same thing that you hear now, you'll be able to see later on in sign language so that it is more inclusive. But we wanted to at least get the audio out because most of what we're going to be talking about, at least tonight, pertains to hearing people more than anyone else.
mhm.
And so we felt that it was just, we needed to get it out and we needed to get it going and we needed to do it now.
you especially much more than I was definitely much more like, hey, let's get this out. I want to like this is very. I really want to share my experience and I want to help others. Like, hey, this is my story. I hope you learn from it, and please don't make life difficult for the next child.
Well, and even more than that, to me, so I guess we should touch a little bit on why we're doing this podcast.
Hmm.
First and foremost, we're doing it because one, I'm hard of hearing. We wanted to spread the word about that, spread the word about deaf culture because we both are in love with the deaf culture um, and what it has to offer and what it's given us. But what really kicked our butts into getting this started was not only my story of growing up orally, but my niece, who is going to be 4 in December, 4 years old, is getting the cochlear implant. And as we've been talking about the cochlear implant and how our feelings on it and things like that, we felt that it was even more pressing to get this podcast out now. So those that are to start with, those that are considering the cochlear implant, we're not saying don't get it, but what we are saying is please do your research and please don't just jump the gun and do whatever the doctors say. There's a whole nother world, there's a whole nother language that's much more successful than the cochlear implant. And we kind of wanted to just bring awareness to that. And we wanted to educate people on that. Because again, growing up and being oral, I struggled my entire life. It wasn't until my 20s when I found ASL that I was actually able to better communicate. And yes, people can hear me. Yes, I can talk, but that doesn't mean it's easy for me. That doesn't mean I enjoy it.
Yeah, I think uh, you brought it to my attention was having the episode one of The Accused, where it has that a deaf surrogate mother. Uh,
No, episode 3 in
oh,
season 1.
episode three in season one. Excuse me. And thank you for that. I forget the episode's name, but yeah,
It's called Ava's Story.
Ava's story. So um, just there, I just want to say one thing right here. Even though they often say, "Oh, the technology is so much better than what it used to be," no, it's not. Yes, technically, the technology great. You go from to a more expensive and better processing coconut implant, but the actual development of the human brain, psychology, and really the emotions and everything that goes into what a person is, that can never be fixed with technology, especially with technology that interferes with the brain.
Well, and I have a huge issue with people saying it's a fix. It's not a fix. It's
Agreed.
never been a fix. It never will be a fix. All that the cochlear implant does essentially is bypasses sound from the cochlea and goes straight into the brain. But that doesn't mean you can decipher what the sound is. That doesn't mean you can understand what the sound is. And to me, the most damaging part is once you have a cochlear implant, if you decide to take it out, if any residual hearing that you had, any at all. So let's say you're like 60% deaf in one ear, and you at that point you're a candidate for the cochlear implant.
Hmm.
Well, that 60% that you had is now gone. You won't even be able to
Yes.
hear an atom bomb go off.
Hmm. Well, technically you would, but your head's gone too. Uh, sorry, dark humor. Uh, And actually, if for those disbelieving, like, oh, I'm sure there's some residual hearing. No, there's not. The electrical or the nerves that go from the ear or the part of the ear that actually takes in sound, the cochlea, and turns that up to the brain, that is cut off. And so there, any natural hearing is gone. Any doctor that's involved with cochlear implants will tell you that. Um, but yet, you, you don't need to struggle to understand. There have been deaf people living their lives long before cochlear implants were even invented.
And
So,
again, we're not saying necessarily don't get the cochlear implant. I want to make that very, very clear. We both believe in choice.
mm-hmm,
We both believe it is a person's choice. If you choose to get the cochlear implant, that's fine. That's on you. What we don't agree with is two parts. One, the misinformation and lack of information that's been given out about the cochlear implant, the deaf community, things like that. And two, neither of us agree, and I think most of you guys, our listeners, will agree too. Children, babies, should not be implanted. A
right,
1 year old should not have brain surgery. A 2 year old should not have brain surgery. They don't have the autonomy to make that decision. They're not developed enough to make, they're still developing. You don't know what their hearing is going to be like. It might get better. It might get worse. Not going to lie, but they're still developing. You have no idea what's going to happen.
yeah.
And I think that's kind of where Thomas and I are at with this, and that's why we feel so passionate about this.
Also, just gonna say, lots of lots of doctors get a kickback from any medical stuff, and doctors, all they ever really see is is a patient when there's a problem or something, but they don't see like how the child's life, how are they gonna live, how are how are their choices taken in the future, and everything else like that. They don't see that. Like when you see a doctor, like when you really only ever see a doctor when you have an issue, and so not only uh, do they get kickbacks for like a nice bonus when they get a patient referred to them, but also they don't see life, for lack of a better term, life as in the joys of being connected with one another, having okay, the learning and growing, making mistakes and getting better. Yes, they can have some, but all they ever see is just a snapshot of when it's wrong. And like, oh, they can be fixed this way. Like, no, there's more to a person than just their deficit, than what's wrong with them. And so, especially for parents of young children, especially, your child is more than just a hearing loss.
Well, and I think you hit on it too without hitting on it in a weird way. Um, Doctors, yes, they see patients, but they don't see the follow up. You know what I mean? Like in Ava's story, which we're gonna get into in a second, she talks about how she regrets getting the cochlear implant and how she constantly has headaches and things like that. Doctors, they don't tend to see the follow up with that. They see the issue, they see the patient, they do what they do, whether that be whatever the treatment is, and then that's it. They also don't see the emotional aspect of um, the cochlear implants. Again, in Ava's story, in The Accused, I think his name's KJ. He talks about how he teaches kids with cochlear implants, and they're all emotionally destroyed because they go home every night, and to parents who don't think they're good enough, who don't love them or respect them, want them to change, all that stuff. Doctors don't necessarily see that aspect of it either.
Yes. So let's go into the episode of the accused. Um, First off, I'm gonna say, uh, Martin is her name. She's a deaf actress that um, and she was given the chance to direct any episode that she wanted, and she chose this story. For those of you who have not seen this episode, again, please watch it. It is on Hulu. Uh, the Accused. You said it was season 2, episode 3. Is that correct?
Season 1, episode 3 is Ava's story.
Season
I'm
1,
sorry. I'm sorry. Episode 2. Episode 2.
episode 2. Yes, and it really does a very good job illustrating, like, hey, what is it like for to show this story that we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
And Brittany and I can talk about it in many different perspectives. Uh,
And we will
Brittany,
plan on it.
yeah, in subsequent episodes, we could talk about the episode in a few different aspects. But I'm thinking tonight we'll just talk about it not only as an introduction of who we are, but also, like, from our experience, what would what is the most likely course of action is caused uh, with the baby's upbringing in comparison to our lived experiences. And note, lived experience, not what will happen, but this is what we have seen everywhere, and this is what we have lived. We have seen this type of thing before, and we've seen the promises. Oh, it'll be better if you just do this. No. Um,
Dinner table
uh,
syndrome almost.
Say that again, Brittany. I'm sorry.
I said it's like dinner table syndrome almost, where the deaf person, they don't hear the conversation and they're like, wait, say that again. What's so funny? What happened? And then the hearing person, their response is always what? I'll tell you later, or it's not important.
Hmm.
No, it is important. You need to tell me now, because otherwise you're telling me that I'm not valued in this conversation, that I have no say.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you right there. Um, I'm not deaf, and I will never actually experience deafness or that, but I do experience a form of that. A little bit about me. Uh, my I'm married with a son, and my wife's family, they are from the Dominican Republic, and they will speak Spanish wherever they get the chance to, in, anywhere and everywhere, because it's the language that they grew up with. Fair enough. But then they are laughing at something, and I am forced to piece together what little bit of Spanish I know and context clues to understand just a sentence or even a few words as to what they're saying. Otherwise, I'm forced to just be quiet and experience the dinner table syndrome, as you said. And yes, but often it feels like, what am I, just a mule, a workhorse that just goes and earns money and then you just don't tell me anything that's going on? Like, no. Then I'm not, there's no love in that situation. Love's
So
often
there's
should.
no love, there's no respect, there's nothing.
Agreed. Agreed. So, and then when it is uh, deemed worthy enough or deemed important enough, they'll finally tell me, but not tell me the entire thing. And so this is the same thing that you're experiencing, but you're saying as in every day in your life.
every day.
Mm-hmm.
You want to piss a deaf person off or a hard of hearing person off? Say that.
Yeah.
Tell them, oh, I'll tell you later. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You're
And
going to
later
have a
never
fight
comes,
on
or if
your
it
hands.
comes, that deaf person could have brought in some knowledge or something to say.
Well, not even that. It's just rude. Like,
Mm-hmm.
think about it this way, too. It's how I look about it. Think about it this way. If three hearing people are talking and I turn and say, like, whisper something, right, to you,
Mm-hmm.
and then your wife, let's say, is having the conversation with us as well, and she's like, "Oh, what'd you say? What'd you say?" And I tell her, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's not important. I'll tell you later." How disrespectful is that? How rude is that? And the worst part is a lot of hearing people don't see it that way. A lot of hearing people are like, "Oh, well, we're trying to spare their feelings." Spare our feelings? What are you talking about? You're just making it worse. Especially in nowadays where everyone's supposed to be included and everyone's so sensitive of everything. Like, come on now.
Yeah. Uh, Also, this can even affect families in their perception. In the episode of The Accused, in Ava's story, the mother of the surrogate mom, she was very emotionally distant from her child, and like only like no communication from the mother to Ava's the surrogate mother, correct?
Ava's the surrogate. Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
thank you. There was no communication or love shown from Ava's mom to Ava herself, like none. And the mother is like, "Oh, she's always been independent." When? How? The
And
you,
granted, that might be true. That might be who and how Ava is. But like you said, there was no communication. There was no. I mean, I was blessed in the aspect of my family never did that to me. They never went that far, you know. But you can tell there definitely was a lot of resentment. There definitely was a lot of um, sadness and hate
mm-hmm,
and all of that towards Ava.
yeah. The, and that is not what a family is supposed to be. It's supposed to be have happy, open communication, love and respect, and trust especially. Um, so, is there anything else we want to talk about with with the child's upbringing and that in relation to our experiences or whatever, or shall we end this
So
episode
I'm
here?
I'm a little hesitant to share this, but now that we're kind of on that topic, I feel like I should.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I was growing up, or
Yeah.
when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I'm going to say a family member. I'm not going to throw them under the bus because I respect and love this person way too much to do that. But I was speaking with a family member and we were talking about the cochlear implant. And this family member was telling me how, the cochlear implant is a miracle and we should be grateful for them, that it restores hearing and all this stuff. And at one point, even told me, well, I'll get to that in a second. So I'm talking to this person about it, and I'm telling this person, like, hey, I'm deaf, like, I'm hard of hearing. You know that eventually I'm going to be fully deaf, and I use sign language. My question to you, and long story short, is what are you going to do? Because if I have a deaf child, my deaf child is going to sign. I'm not going to I'm not going to implant them. I don't agree with that, you know.
Mhm.
If they want to do the implant later on, we can totally do that. That's fine. But I'm not, again, I don't believe children and babies should be implanted. I think it's, a mature decision. And this person told me straight up that I would be an abusive parent. Use the word abusive parent if I did not implant my child, and that they would fight me to get custody for that child, and that they would implant them. And I said, wow, that's pretty extreme. I said, okay, but you're entitled to your opinion. That's whatever, whatever. I mean, obviously I was upset, but kind of just left it at that. And I said, but long story short, if you want to talk to this child, my child, hypothetically,
Mhm.
you're going to have to learn sign language. Like, if you want to speak to this child, you're going to have to learn sign language. And they look at me and they say, well, then I guess I won't speak to that child and I will fight you for custody. So good luck with that.
All right. So that's kind of what we were talking about right there. So you're gonna take that child and just basically abandon them. So you're not gonna talk with that child and take them away from the only love and support they're getting.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
Well, and it's funny to me because they kept saying that I was abusive. I was abusive. And I'm like, okay, how is it abusive? Well, language deprivation. You're not giving them language. You're not giving them this. You're not giving them that. Well, I am giving them language. It's just not a spoken language,
mhm.
you know? And I was like, I think it's more abusive to put a baby under the knife like that.
Yes.
So it was just a very interesting conversation. Now, keep in mind this conversation happened about, gosh, 10, 15 years ago, which is why I don't want to use the person's name or title, because I'm sure their viewpoints had changed on this. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Especially now knowing that I have a niece that's hard of hearing with me.
Mhm.
I don't, again, want to throw them under the bus, but I just, that hit me in such a way. I just didn't even have words. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And the sad thing is that is not a uncommon story. We
Yeah.
hear that so much more than you guys
Then they
would
hear us.
imagine.
Yeah. Awesome. So expecting so listeners, if you are wanting to see our lovely faces and stuff, expect to see the signed version of this in the next couple of days, hopefully within a week. Again, my name is Thomas James Thomas, and this has been Brittany. And Brittany, what what is your can you tell everyone the name of this podcast?
Welcome to Deaf Life.
Yeah. Welcome to Deaf Life.
And we hope you've enjoyed it. We didn't even really get into the episode this
Mm-hmm.
episode. There's so much more that we want to talk about with that episode. Um
And
so many layers. Like, that episode is just an onion because you pull back one layer and there's another.
mhm.
Um
And so
so
many different perspectives we can talk about it from, like from the father's perspective, and I can the the biological dad. I can really understand his perspective where he's coming from.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, we're gonna hit this from the biological parents. We're gonna hit both of them, the mother and the father, because that's just such a interesting dynamic. We're gonna hit it from, again, Ava's perspective a little bit more. We're gonna hit it from her husband's perspective, Ava's husband,
Hmm.
because that's just everything about this episode is just loaded and it's just so great. So go get a chance to watch it and join us next time. And hope you enjoy.
All right. Thank you all.
Love you.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye. All right. That is the end of. I'm going to cut off the recording right now.